Apple begins work on new, more durable facade for downtown Portland store. Think that one through. They are making this, they have reimagined and rethought this store to be more riot proof. Okay. Because, normally Apple stores, they have the big glass enclosures, just full visibility in because they're so cool. They're just showing this big open space where you can go in and, buy a computer, buy an iPad, buy your iPhone, whatever it is. But this Apple store in downtown Portland is so close to the epicenter of all of the riots, the violent riots, that it got rocked. It got rocked. I took footage of this store when I was down there August of 2020. And at the time, I did not realize this was an Apple store because it was so fully boarded up from floor to ceiling with plywood that you couldn't tell what was there. You had no idea. There were some steps out front. And what they'd done is they'd done a whole bunch of, what they call art, but it's basically just graffiti on the wooden 4x8 sheets of plywood. It was part of, it's almost part of the walking tour of Portland at that time. You're like, let's go over and look at this stuff. This is wildly out of control because you had half blocks of areas that had just closed up businesses and doors shuttered and plywood out in front. You still got some of that in Portland. You still got some of that. I had confirmation of that the other day. Somebody that came up to Seattle for a concert told me, hey, one of the bigger, one thing is you don't have, at least near where our concert center is, our Climate Pledge Arena, we don't have lots of boarded up stores. Seattle's kind of worked, our new mayor has worked really hard at getting things kind of squared away from the standpoint of, okay, you got to have the businesses open because that brings people back. People feel safe. Whereas in Portland, we know that Portland is one of the last cities for its downtown core to recover. And it's precisely because of stuff like this. You've got an Apple building that literally looks like a prison right now with the metal fencing that's been up. You have those views of where prison guards are walking the new inmate in through this gauntlet of metal fencing. That's kind of what the outside of Apple looks like right now as they figure out, okay, we're in downtown Portland. We're a block away from the federal courthouse. We're probably going to get rocked again. What can we come up with that's going to make this place look inviting to come in and buy a computer and yet still have the ability to quickly change out said, whatever pieces of, walling or see-through that we're going to use to make this store a viable store again. They're working on that. Let's jump on in. Let's see what we got going on. What is happening in Portland? Apple has started work on a major overhaul of its downtown Portland store with a new design that appears more resistant to vandalism. So, can you imagine the store managers? Okay, so here's the dealio. We might get rocked again. So we got to make this place a little bit more robust. We need to come up with construction materials that are light and sophisticated, and yet we can tear out of there in a heartbeat and replace them if we need to, that aren't too expensive. Riot proof. That's literally what we've got going on, right? So the people unfamiliar with the company's plan say the work won't be done until sometime after the holidays. Apple's downtown store has been obscured by imposing metallic fencing since February 2021. Not unlike the Seattle Police Department's East Precinct. They had some just Darth Vader-ish looking fencing. It's like, okay, are they keeping us out or are they keeping the police inside there safe? It's hard to tell. Maybe a little combination of both. The fences protect the store's signature tall glass panels from vandalism, but have become a symbol of Portland's inability to restore normal functions. When you go into a downtown core of an area, and this was after the upheaval that accompanied the pandemic and the protests that rocked downtown in 2020, the summer of love. That was crazy, wasn't it? Portland was the absolute worst. You still hear lyrics and songs about Portland being on fire. And then you've got other people that chime in with, I was just living my own best life, not really too worked up about what was going on in downtown. We lived in the burbs and it was fine. Now, a lot of the stuff that, happened in downtown has spread out to the burbs. And I think it's just kind of a free-for-all in Portland right now. And it's really sad for the residents who've been there for a long, long time. And yet you get what you vote for, right? Get what you vote for. Apple unveiled the planned facade in a meeting with the Downtown Neighborhood Association in May. It features a storefront security enclosure that consists of dozens of clear polycarbonate panels that form a barrier in front of the store's glass walls. All right. So you got the signature glass walls. Literally, it just looks like, a house made of glass, right? It's a really cool look. I think they're really stylish. I think they're really cool looking. I'm not a huge consumer of Apple products, although I've got an iPad here that we use for controlling one of the things. And I use an iPad at home, but otherwise I'm an Android and a PC guy. Just most business guys are, right? Didn't have Apple back in the day. It wouldn't run your business software. Still doesn't run our appraisal software. So you've got that. So I appreciate the glass in an Apple store, but could you imagine, being in on that manager's meeting? All right. How do we not have people break in, but we have people be able to look in and just make this the consumer buying experience that they're hoping for here in downtown Portland, knowing damn well that the epicenter of Rose City Antifa is literally a couple of blocks away. So if you're looking on, if you're following me on YouTube, here is, and you can see what's going on. You can tell, all right, we've got the 3 parks here. And then literally the Apple store is literally it's got to be from the northwest corner of Lonsdale Square, which is right across from the federal courthouse that continuously got rocked in Portland that Trump threatened to send in troops on. This Apple store is, it's a couple hundred feet away. It's that close. So it's if something goes sideways in Portland again, which it will, because that's just the way Portlandia works, Apple store is literally at the epicenter of all of this action and activity. And that's why I knew it was there. I didn't know initially when I walked by. I just thought it was some kind of boarded up store. You literally couldn't tell what was going on. It was so crazily covered up with plywood because they just had a massive run on the store on that May 21st or May 31st, 2020. That was the initial night where all the concentrated, coordinated efforts from Black Lives Matter and Antifa across the United States happened. And those were coordinated. They took down Bellevue Square here in Bellevue. They brought up a bunch of thugs from Federal Way, a city to the south. And we know this because Bellevue police worked for a year and a half after that, something like that, to apprehend, arrest, and then make sure they got prison time or jail time for their bad deeds here in Bellevue. They went after them. They went after them hard. That's kind of what you have to do so that there isn't that whole, let's go back and hit Bellevue again. What will happen? And that's why you've got that going on in Portland, because they know they're just going to get out and not much is going to go on. The smaller polycarbonate panels are stronger than the store's main glass enclosure, the company told neighbors, and can be obtained from a local supplier. That's good. So what we're saying here is that we know these glass panels are going to get rocked again. So they're trying to do what they can to prevent such an outbreak, but it's kind of hopeless, isn't it? I mean, you know what's going to go on in downtown Portland. Apple store. I mean, it's just a sitting target for this. So they're coming up with some kind of, halfway measure that allows them to have that store stay open and yet not get broken into, on the regular by the thugs that are in Portland doing their thing, peacefully protesting. That means Apple can replace them more quickly if they're broken. Apple declined comment on the construction work that began last week in downtown. 2 people familiar with the company's plans, though, said that work will proceed in stages over at least a few months. In the meantime, the metal security barrier will remain in place. That's what I'm looking at right now. So these are probably 7 foot tall, 2-piece security. I would call them panels or walls. They're portable, but you hook them up with brackets to other pieces, similar pieces. And then on the bottom, they've got a big piece that provides stability to hold the thing upright. So when I was down there the summer of 2020, August of 2020, I was able to witness they had brought in some new security, whatever they call these walls, metal fencing, big, tall metal fencing. And they had placed these out in front of the federal building that I just talked about. And they were brand new. And one of the police officers that was kind of just giving me the lowdown on the front steps of the Justice Center, he said, "You see those over there?" And I'm like, "Yeah, those are brand new. We'll just have to see how these do, because these protesters," he said, "they're just going to rip them right down." But, the feds were doing what they could do to try and, keep people at bay from literally trying to light the federal courthouse on fire or have a major breach of the federal courthouse in downtown Portland, because that happened as well, right? You got peaceful protesters trying to rip open a door and then throw in who knows what, just like they did in Seattle, tried to, these people doing this stuff were just out of their minds. And so we tried to keep them out with this kind of stuff. But I witnessed, groups of, and I've got video of it. I witnessed groups of people just tearing down this metal fencing, coming over with whatever objects on hand, beating the pieces apart, hauling them out, tossing them over. I mean, you get enough people working on a metal structure like we're talking about, it doesn't take too many, adults reefing on this type of metal structure to tear it all down. And so, what took probably hours to put these things up out in front of the courthouse in Portland, I watched unravel at about 10 o'clock on a Saturday evening in probably, an hour. Maybe an hour 15. They just went ham and tore all these down. And then they take them and just toss them in the street. Department of Transportation came by the next morning, picked everything up. I shot footage of that. It's like nothing happened. It's literally Groundhog Day in Portland. Groundhog Day. All right. We're going to clean up some of the graffiti. We're going to clean up the garbage strewn around. We're going to put out the fires of where we used to have the statues, and now they're bonfires. And we're going to clean up all the fencing. And, they try and piecemeal that back together and put up the fencing again that night, and they do it all over again. That's literally what happened for 100 nights in Portland. And people want to say, I was just living my best life and things were good and everything was fine. Meanwhile, this is going on in downtown Portland, and Apple, major anchor store in any business environment, is still dealing with how do we cope? How do we cope with this? What do we do? Yeah, it's wild, right? It's wild. And nobody wants to say it out loud, which is, you know what? You're going to have this happen again. That's the bottom line here, right? That's why Apple is doing what it's doing to prevent, further expensive damage of their glass house, and try and keep the stuff inside the store there and keep the bad guys out. But Apple knows darn well they've got to shore this bad boy up. And so that's literally what we've got going on here. Rioters broke through the glass doors of Apple's downtown store and looted it out on the night of May 31st, 2020. That was the night I was just talking about. That was the first night of continuous protest that lasted throughout that summer following the police killing of George Floyd in Minneapolis. Apple's store remained closed for several months after the protest. Apple didn't say why, but many Apple stores in other cities were open during the period. And the company spent at least part of the time repairing damage to its Portland store. Well, because Apple knew it was going to get rocked, just like they know now it's going to get rocked again. At some point, it's going to get rocked. So, hey, let's come up with a more preventative approach. Let's reimagine and rethink our safety to the Portland store, because hardly anywhere else is going to experience what this store inevitably will down the road. But during that period, the storefront became a canvas for murals reflecting on the racial justice movement that emerged in Portland following Floyd's killing. Portland artist Emma Berger painted a distinctive mural of Floyd on the boarded up storefront. I've got a photo of that. I've got video of that, soon augmented by other art calling for social change. Yeah, that was difficult to see. Okay, so you destroyed a store and then you painted pictures on the plywood out in front. Okay, you got us coming and going here. This feels a little bit hypocritical. You were the ones that literally destroyed all the glass and looted that store. And then when it gets boarded up, because it can't have normal glass up, it can't operate in a normal business way, you paint murals out front. That one to me was just kind of like, okay, this is what we're doing. This is what's going on. CHOP in Seattle, exact same way. You boarded up the East Precinct, and then you painted murals on everything. All right. Okay. You got us literally coming and going on the same topic, right? Wild. Just some crazy stuff. As Apple removed the plywood and reopened the store last year, it donated the mural to Portland Civil Rights Organization, Don't Shoot, PDX. Yeah. Whole thing to me is just like, it's one thing to have social justice causes. It's another thing to loot a store. It's another thing to do graffiti everywhere in the name of art. And if you want to have a sanctioned graffiti area, go for it. Take your spray can, your cans of spray paint, and just go ham. But where you've got a store trying to do business that's trying to actually benefit the community, I'm a hard no-go on just graffitiing it up because it's just such a terrible look. It looks terrible. People want to claim that's art. Maybe some of this stuff was. Most of it to me just kind of looked like, that's people on some kind of trip doing some what they call art on the side of a public building that just got rocked. It's the way I call it. All right. That's it for me on this one. Thanks so much for being here. We'll catch up soon. Talk then. Bye for now.